and it definitely matters. The ironies, well, some of you will say, what you just said is the most ironic thing that you've said in all your lectures on Inferno, and I'll say, you're right. But notice the irony, the interesting ripple effects of this classificational system, right? So, for example, Dido will end up not with the suicides, but with the lustful. Anytime you start making these kinds of constructions, it's kind of strange. Well, how come so-and-so doesn't end up here, and so-and-so ends up here and not there, right? And of course, the ripple effect, think of it, like we said, Julius Caesar is jacked by Brutus, but that allows for Caesar Augustus, the great Caesar Augustus, to come to power, and that wouldn't have happened if Brutus hadn't killed JC, right? And to that degree, or we imagine that it wouldn't have happened, and to that degree, was killing JC such a terrible thing? Or, right, Judas betrays Christ, Christ is killed, but in Christian theology for Dante, that allows for Dante to have the opportunity of salvation. So to what degree has Judas done something so terrible? Also, you've got a very interesting bit of irony here. It almost seems like Aristotle is given more precedence than Moses in the Mosaic Code and the Ten Commandments. I mean, go back and take a look at the Ten Commandments, that Decalogue, right, from Exodus 20, and ask the question, okay, so, we got different kinds of understandings, the distinctions that are really drawn more from Aristotle than anything biblical about these distinctions about what makes sin, and certain sins worse or more punishable. Let's think about Dante as poet. Well, we need a little break here, don't we, as we've said, from the action, which allows us to catch our breath and for him to write a little mini Platonic dialogue. Dante as politician. Notice, the more political or the more communal the sin, the worse it's punished in the afterlife. Dante the philosopher, well, it's self-evident. We've got Aristotle's Ethics and Physics literally mentioned here, and a reference or an allusion to Plato's Book 7 in the Cave Allegory from Republic, right? That is to say, for Aristotle's Ethics and Physics, it helps to explain God's Christian plan. And when you put that one in your notes, you might put an exclamation point and then a question mark after it, right? At 3a, well, think about this. The relationship between the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid, all of them in some way are trying to justify God's plan, right? Who is responsible for all of this kind of thing? We got the same thing going on here, don't we? Also, of course, we've mentioned Plato and Aristotle, especially the Republic of Plato, Aristotle's Ethics and Physics, both mentioned here, right? And this one tries to explain why Dante and Christians needed philosophy to help them to be able intellectually to explain or justify, as Milton will call it, the ways of God to men. Machiavelli's Prince comes to mind, other kinds of texts of explanation. We haven't mentioned Boethius's contemplation of, or consolation of philosophy, and this text that we mentioned before, this consolation of philosophy, really important. Or, for example, Thomas More's Utopia. These are also texts that try to explain and critique at the same time civilization and more particularly political interchange and exchange. Finally, at 3b, well, I mean, you knew this question was coming at the conclusion of Canto 11. Does this classification make sense to you? Right? And as we go forward, I want you to be critical of this, right? So, for example, is usury wrong? And how has time kind of changed views of any number of the quote-unquote sins here, right? Okay, there's a whole swath of people that don't consider sexual perversion, sodomy, sexual perversion, homosexuality as anything that would be understood or construed as evil or wrong at all. So notice how over time we begin to have different kinds of understandings. So for example, in Dante's text, usury is wrong, but most even practicing Christians today will not have a problem with usury. Fascinating, right? Well, that's Canto 11. I hope that it's been a provocative study for you. We now will get on with the journey itself. To finish Inferno, we move now on to Canto 12. We're going to see another monster. This will be Minotaur. We're going to be taking a look now at the violent, who will be in a river of blood. It's going to be another one of those really grotesque images. Thank you.